Living in survival mode, the South African experience. Being South African comes with its own set of struggles, and for many people, it feels like living in a constant state of survival mode. One of the most notorious issues is load shedding, a fancy term for rolling blackouts that can leave people without electricity for hours or even days at a time. Entire schedules revolve around Eskom's power outage timetable, with South Africans joking that they don't check the time, they check the load shedding schedule. Cooking dinner, charging your phone, or keeping food fresh in the fridge becomes a game of luck. Candlelight dinners aren't romantic, they're just life. And just when you think things can't get worse, the power cuts mess with water supply too, because water pumps run on, you guessed it, electricity. Then there's crime, which hangs over daily life like a dark cloud. South Africa has some of the world's highest rates of robbery, carjackings, and home invasions. Many South Africans live in constant fear, installing electric fences, burglar bars, security cameras, and hiring private security companies because calling the police is often seen as a waste of time. Don't stop at red lights at night isn't just advice. It's survival strategy, as hijackings are a serious threat. Wealthier neighborhoods are basically mini fortresses with armed guards, while poorer communities are left to fend for themselves. Even if you manage to avoid becoming a victim of crime, corruption ensures that justice rarely prevails. Politicians and police officers are often seen as being for sale, and bribes are just another unofficial tax on daily life. Unemployment is a soul-crushing reality for many South Africans, especially for young people. With unemployment rates hovering around 30 to 40%, graduates with degrees still struggle to find work. It's not uncommon to see people with university degrees working as cashiers or street vendors just to survive. This leads to the infamous hustle culture, where everyone is selling something, from perfumes and phone accessories to second-hand clothes, just to get by. The formal job market feels like a who-you-know game, while the informal economy is overcrowded with too many people chasing too few customers. On top of that, wage inequality is a massive problem, with CEOs earning millions while workers live on scraps. Public transport in South Africa is another headache. If you don't have a car, you're relying on taxis, not the nice yellow cabs, but cramped minibus taxis that drive like they're being chased by ghosts. These taxis have no schedule, no seatbelts, and no patience. They overload passengers, speed through red lights, and treat lanes as optional guidelines. The joke is that getting on a minibus taxi is a mix of public transport and extreme sports. Trains aren't much better, as they're slow, frequently delayed, or outright cancelled due to vandalism, cable theft, or just because. If you're relying on buses, good luck. They're often late, overcrowded, and vulnerable to service disruptions caused by strikes, which have become so common they feel like public holidays. Healthcare is supposed to be a human right, but public hospitals in South Africa often look like scenes from a disaster movie. Long lines, understaffed wards, and bring-your-own bedding are common experiences. If you can afford private healthcare, great, but that comes at a premium only the wealthy can afford. Most people are left waiting for hours or days to see a doctor, and sometimes you'll be told, "We're out of medication, come back next week." Medical professionals are overworked and underpaid, leading many to leave the country for better opportunities abroad. Meanwhile, the government promises healthcare reform every election cycle, but all people see are more broken promises. Service delivery is another punchline. Roads are filled with potholes so deep you could fish in them. If you report it, you might as well be wishing on a star, because the local government is either too slow, too broke, or too corrupt to care. Water cuts, sewage leaks, and broken streetlights are so normal that people hardly even complain anymore. Protests about service delivery happen regularly, with communities blocking roads and burning tires to demand basic services, but nothing really changes. Racial inequality is a lingering wound that South Africa just can't seem to heal. Despite the end of apartheid in 1994, the wealth gap between black and white citizens is still glaringly obvious. Land reform has been a hot-button issue for years, with promises to redistribute land to black South Africans turning into endless debates, court cases, and broken dreams. Many black South Africans still live in informal settlements, essentially slums, while wealthy suburbs with mansions and golf courses are just down the road. This inequality fuels racial tension, which is still very much alive. Rainbow Nation was a hopeful slogan, but in reality, race relations remain fragile, and arguments about who's to blame are constant. Politics in South Africa is like reality TV with worse production quality. Former President Jacob Zuma's corruption scandals were so wild that his whole presidency felt like a plot twist every week. The current government promises reform, but people have heard it all before. Parliament debates are infamous for devolving into shouting matches, and sometimes it looks like they're one insult away from a WWE match. Meanwhile, politicians who are caught with their hands in the cookie jar somehow keep their jobs or get redeployed to another position, leading to the phrase "failed upwards" being applied regularly. The frustration is that no matter who people vote for, the cycle of corruption and incompetence continues. Lastly, there's the mental toll of living in survival mode all the time. When you're dealing with power cuts, unemployment, crime, and a government that doesn't seem to care, it's hard to feel hopeful. People joke about sangxiety, a constant feeling of dread about what will go wrong next. Will there be power today? Will the taxis strike? Will the ATM have cash? Will your car make it over that pothole without snapping in half? This constant anxiety becomes normalized, and South Africans have learned to laugh through the pain. Memes about load shedding, potholes, and leaving the country flood social media daily, and humor becomes the only coping mechanism people have left. Despite it all, South Africans are resilient and resourceful. They find a way to make a plan, even when it seems impossible. Whether it's using inverters for power, boiling water on a fire, or finding joy in braais, barbecues with friends, South Africans refuse to be broken by their circumstances. But for many, it feels like they're being forced to overcome far too often. The country has beauty, diversity, and potential, but for now, being South African means living in a state of unpredictability, where survival is a skill you have to master just to get through the day.